Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we are at the beginning of the international free agent amateur signing period here for the 2041 offseason. As we typically do, we solicited feedback from the Worldwide Scouting Department on which direction we should go this year. I know that not all of you have unfortunately had time to opine. Anytime I ask for specific information from the Worldwide Scouting Department, I do give at least 24 hours before I begin my next episode. And that's about exactly what I gave this time. Sometimes I do give a little bit longer, but I know it's going to be a very busy week for me at work. This upcoming week might not be able to do too many episodes, so I wanted to get this next episode out there, but apologies to those of you who opined on the previous episode and what we should do when it was too late for that information to influence my decision. And we've got a very interesting top end of this IAFA class this year. I think there's some really interesting players out there, and I think the Worldwide Scouting Department tends to agree with me. There's 4 pitchers that we have scouted very aggressively, and really split reaction from the Worldwide Scouting Department on which way to go. Bladestaff said that he would be happy with any of the 5-star pitchers, and there are 4 4-star or higher potential pitchers, and all of them received support from members of the Worldwide Scouting Department if we do go with a pitcher, but there was nobody with overwhelming support. Kevin McDowell likes the starter Alfredo Verdugo, the left-hander, good stamina, good at holding on runners, has the durability. Kevin noted that we could possibly get Verdugo into the development lab down the line to add another pitch and turn him from potentially being a very good pitcher if he reaches his full potential to a potentially great one. Certainly someone that I am considering. His $3.6 million price tag is one of the higher ones, but still a very interesting prospect. Wilson Rivera was the choice of Avery Shayam. Similar profile with a 3-pitch arsenal, and the 3rd pitch not being all that incredible. Really good stamina, not great at holding on runners, throws harder right now than Verdugo does, and another guy whose stuff, movement, and control we think could be above average. Rivera, the only righty of these 3 pitchers that we're going to talk about. Louis Gamba, catfish, was the recommendation of Scott Donovan. Nice balance between stamina and his ability to hold on runners, and he's got a potential 4-pitch arsenal, although a lot of work to do on some of those off pitches. I think his stuff could be exceptional to go with plus movement and plus control for the young lefty out of South Africa. And the choice of the people is Clorindo Moreno, and that's only because there were 2 supporters of Moreno if we go with a pitcher. Dodo Dude and Quaitime both selected Moreno. I think the potential versatility of his repertoire is a strong point in his favor. Really good stamina and outstanding at holding on runners. I can't remember whether it was Dodo Dude or Quiet Time, but one of them noted that it's okay for pitchers to potentially be a little quirky with their personalities. So no harm, no foul, perhaps, and that he does have a couple of red traits. I think that his stuff could be absolutely outstanding, and his movement and control could both be well above average if he does reach his full potential. Perhaps not surprisingly, given his profile and his 5-star potential, Mr. Moreno at $3.8 million is looking for the most of any of the 4 pitchers that we've talked about. So very interesting options. As I mentioned last episode, we've got $5.7 million to spend. I'd love this to somehow be a year where we can come out of this IAFA period with two players that we really like. But given that there is such good high-end talent this year, I think from a practical perspective, it probably makes sense to just hone in on the one guy that we really want and ensure that we do everything possible to bring that player on board. And then if we've got some money left afterwards, let the chips fall where they may, but might not be the year to get two offers out at the start. I think it's probably the year, given that there is such high-end talent, to ensure that we get one of the 6 or 7 players that we really love, and then if we can supplement that with another good player or two on the back end, even better. And knowing that there's 10 players that we can do the more intense scouting for at our training camp, since we talked about 4 pitchers, there are 6 position players left to talk about. A couple didn't get much love from the worldwide scouting department other than an occasional honorable mention, essentially in terms of their support. Wilfredo Orozco, the shortstop out of Venezuela, was one of those. I think his bat could be a bit above average, like the infield range, like the work ethic and financial ambition. Only looking for $2.2 million, so in a perfect world, he might be somebody that we could supplement in on the back end, but probably not someone we're going to go at to start. Could say the same thing about Luis Aguilar, another guy with a nice personality, competent defensively, but think his contact, gap power, and home run power could all be above average. Think that the left-handed hitting Venezuelan outfielder with the lowest demand of $1.5 million of anyone that we have been looking at could be an interesting player to consider as a supplemental pick if we're able to get one of the big guns with our primary pick, and more accurately than a pick, the preponderance of our money that we have to spend is perhaps a better way to describe that. 2 players got support from one scout, and as it turns out, it was the same scout who highlighted these 2 players. The catcher Santiago Renaga was one of the primary choices of Avery Shaham among position players. Solid-looking defensive catcher and a potentially outstanding bat for a catcher. Could be above average in everything with borderline world-class power if Renaga fully develops. Looking for $3 million, so not going to be cheap, but would certainly be a great player to bring on board. And the other guy that Avery Shaham liked was the right fielder Vasco Espargera, a switch-hitting outfielder, a little better looking defensively than Renaga, and another guy who looks like a real interesting bat. Although his contact is only average and he's going to strike out a ton, we think that his gap power, home run power, and his eye could all be well above average. Also brings that high leadership into the clubhouse. I did say that I think I just said Renaga was a outfielder. I was thinking back to Aguilar, so apologies for that. Espargera looking for $2.8 million, so also not cheap. A guy that I really liked in the last episode that I compared to Deshaun Seifu of OOTP 24 Buffalo Wings fame is Juan Bonilla. And he was liked by Scott Donovan, Coach 1549, Blade Staff, and Kevin McDowell as a pretty good direction to go if we do go for a position player. I don't think his profile is quite the same as Deshaun Seifu's, as some have noted. I think Kevin McDowell noted that Seifu had that durability that Juan Bonilla doesn't have. And outside of this potentially insane contact that Bonilla has, I think most of Seifu's other ratings were a bit better than where Bonilla's likely to end up. Seifu had that blistering speed, but also better stealing instincts. But Bonilla looks like he could definitely be a very adept defensive player. great personality with high adaptability, work ethic, and intelligence, low greed. Not going to walk a ton and not going to hit a lot of home runs, but a switch hitting middle infielder who can play, probably, depending on how he develops and where we end up playing him, borderline gold glove defense, stealing a lot of bases, and batting average, if he reaches his full potential, well over 300 with tons of doubles and triples, is a very interesting hitting profile. And Bonilla, who's looking for 2.2 million, is certainly on our short list. But the choice of the people being the worldwide scouting department, is the second baseman Adalberto Batias. Coach 1549, Sean Grattan, Blade Staff, Jarek Braxton, Quaitime, and Paul West all had Batias at or very near to the top of their lists, and I understand why. One of the criticisms of Batias from those who favored Bonilla was the defensive limitations of Batias and that he doesn't really have a position, although I'd argue that at 6'4", with borderline competent infield stats, he could be a pretty decent first baseman. I get the point that first base isn't necessarily a position that you're going to target when you're picking somebody up, since it's one of the less important infield or overall positions, quite honestly, defensively. But there is a lot to like about Batias. High work ethic. He's got the durability to keep him in the lineup every day. And we think his contact and his home run power could both be borderline exceptional, to go with a well above average eye. Gap power, not going to hit a ton of extra base hits, or more accurately, not going to hit tons of balls into the gap. But given that he's got such poor speed anyways, if there's an area where I don't mind him having average type ratings, it's probably the gap power. So it's an interesting decision for me as I sit here. I think I agree with the worldwide scouting department that Batias is the highest ceiling player if he fully develops. 80 contact, 75 power, 65 eye. You wrap those three things all up together, and you've got a guy who could be hitting 320 with an on-base percentage well into the 400s, who's also hitting 30, 40, possibly 50 home runs a year if he reaches his full potential. That being said, he's got further to go than some of the other prospects. Just 25 in his contact, his gap power, and his eye today, according to our scout. And we do have very high scouting accuracy on him. So although we project him to have an incredibly high ceiling, he's got a little more work to do than some of these other prospects to reach that ceiling. But he, in my mind, is still the most interesting overall player. My concern, though, is with the $3 million demand. Even if we're aggressive early and we get him signed, it probably doesn't leave enough money to pair him with somebody else. Whereas if we went a little bit cheaper with a guy like Juan Bonilla, who's looking for 2.2 million, we could try to get the player with the great personality, really good defense, good speed, and a switch hitter who can make a ton of contact signed, and then certainly have money to pair him with somebody like Orozco or Aguiar. And in a perfect world, maybe be able to pair him up with one of the less expensive pitchers. Quite honestly, most likely probably Louis Gamba, just because he's looking for less than the others. And I'm very tempted to try to do a twofer. I think there is definitely a path, if you get a little bit lucky, to be able to pair up Wilfredo Orozco, who's looking for 2.2 million as an infielder, with Juan Bonilla, who's looking for a similar amount. I think there's some chance you offer them both 2.8 million right from the start and I could get them both signed. Certainly not guaranteed, and it's clearly conceivable that one or both of them goes for $4.5, $5+ million when all is said and done. But I do think that the contact, power, eye, durability, work ethic combination of Turf Bacius, despite the fact that he's got poor speed, despite the fact that he's a first baseman or a DH, and even despite the fact that he's a right-handed hitter, which is a little less interesting generally than a switch hitter or a left-hander, which we have options of in this pool. I just think the top end of Bacius is the most interesting. Recognize he's got a lot of work to get there with the low contact, gap power, and eye ratings now. He is still only 16 years old. Would love to come out of the draft with two guys, or the IAFA period with two guys, but I really want to come out with a guy that I love, and Adalberto Bacius is certainly a guy that is high on my list. As much as I like him, though, I'm probably going to be a little less aggressive than I sometimes am with my first bid. I want to get him signed, and I'd like to get him signed quick, but I also do want to keep enough financial flexibility so that if he accepts an offer that's not exceptional, we still have an opportunity to bring in another big player. And if he says that he wants more money, which is likely where this will end up, well, we do have $5.7 million to, in all likelihood, ensure that we get him when all is said and done. So we are going to offer Bacius, who's looking for $3 million, 3.35, so only a little more than 10% over asking price. A lot of times an offer like this isn't going to get them to lock up early. Usually I found if you start getting 20-25% over what they're asking for, gives you a better chance to lock them up early and often. But I'm still trying to go for the home run this year with not just Bacius, but another guy that we really like, and every penny will be important to make that happen. Probably turns out that we're only going to end up with Bacius when all is said and done, but I'm going to at least get an offer out to him early and see if maybe we can get him locked up at a very reasonable $3.35 million. While we're waiting to hear back from him, we'll continue monitoring what's going on with our old friends Jake Ortega, Kimani Ibekwe, and for that matter, a couple of our former catchers, Dave Ackley and Jaden Boakai, in the free agent market, as well as our old buddy Chase Dora, and find out if any of these guys happen to sign over the next week or two as we're hopefully figuring out what our IAFA class might look like. And Bacius says he likes our offer, but as you can see, the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Phillies are also interested in him, so odds are the price is going to go up. Chase Dora is finally gone. Got a supplemental first-round pick in compensation for him. Look at what kind of contract he ended up getting. Ended up being a 5-year deal for $117 million from, of course, the Dodgers organization. Wish Dora well. We ended up dropping below 100 to 99 in fan interest. Aren't sure exactly how high we were above 100 at that point, but if and when Mr. Ortega signs with somebody else, would expect a more impactful result on our fan interest, unfortunately. And unsurprisingly, Bacius is looking for more money, says that he's got an offer that he really likes from San Francisco, and the offer that he's looking for is now up to almost $4.6 million. So we are certainly going to have to pay up for Mr. Bacius to bring him on board. Going to at least see what some of these other people are thinking about. I'm assuming Moreno, the top in my mind and the worldwide scouting department's mind. Pitcher is looking for big bucks. Says he's only in the $2.6 million range. I don't know that he's really going to sign for that when he says he was looking for $3.8 million, but that number is low enough that there's a batter we really like Mr. Bonilla, who's not looking for crazy money either at this point. Maybe we pivot. A Racehorse Bonilla says he's looking for only $2.6 million right now. So there is, in theory, a path to potentially bring on both Bonilla and Moreno. Moreno being the choice by a very small margin of the worldwide scouting department among pitchers, and Bonilla being the second option behind Bacias. $2.56 million. I don't think we really end up with both Moreno and Bonilla. But the idea of pivoting a bit is interesting to me. What's Orozco looking for now? $2.2 million, so he's right where he said he was. If we don't sign Bacias, he's certainly someone that I'm going to track over time, because he was kind of my first choice, and obviously he was the choice of the worldwide scouting department. But there's a path to getting both Bonilla and Moreno on board, and I think I'm going to at least explore that path. Bonilla says he's looking for $2.6 million. We're going to offer him $2.9. And while we're doing that, we've got, obviously, if you can do some simple math, $2.8 million left. And we're going to offer every penny of that to Moreno. He's looking for $2.56. I think it is very conceivable that one or both of these guys comes back to me and says they want more money. In which case, maybe we'll still be able to pivot back to Bacias if we want to. But there's a non-zero chance that we lock them both up. I don't think it's much above 0%, but to be able to bring on both Bonilla and Moreno is something that I think is at least worth throwing a Hail Mary on and seeing what happens. I know it's a big pivot from Bacias, who I was just talking about as the highest ceiling player. But with the demand for the pitcher who had been looking for $3.8 million at a level where we can at least get an offer out to him above what his current demand is, I think the twofer is the way to at least try to proceed. Again, could very well pivot back in 2 or 3 days, and the hope at that point would be that Bacias is still on the market, or that we at least end up with Bonilla or Moreno, and then can maybe supplement in an Orozco or an Aguiar, someone a little more expensive with one of those guys. And Bonilla has come back and said he is looking for more money, not surprisingly. He's looking for $4.6 million as well. So the big guns are going for big money. Moreno allegedly favors our offer, $2.8 million for a pitcher that we thought was going to be $4 million, or close to $4 million. Might not be a bad option. We'll see what he has to say. If he comes back and is looking for $4.5, $5 million, and Bacias or Bonilla are still on the market, it's probably the time to pivot back to one of those two. Hopefully he'll let us know while there's still options with the other players. Check in on the franchise, Jake Ortega. His demand just keeps going up. 4 years, $40 million a pop. Says he's got an offer from New York, but it's January 21st, and he hasn't signed anywhere yet. And good news and bad news, we've got Moreno signed, but Bacias is off the market. So Moreno, I think he was the top pitcher, even with the personality quirks. A lefty with a potential 6-pitch arsenal. Good stamina, outstanding at holding on runners. And we think his stuff could be off the charts to go with excellent movement and control. Really happy to have him on board in our organization. But Bacias signed with the Pirates, I'm guessing probably for every penny possible. See if we can actually pull up his card here for the first time. Yeah, $5.7 million. So he ended up going for the max. We certainly could have matched that. In my experiences, if you put out the highest or a tied for highest offer, they usually end up with you. We are going to, of course, for the worldwide scouting department and my own edification, make sure to add Mr. Bacias to our prospect short list to track what happens with him over the course of his career. But we somehow ended up with a really big-time pitcher, and we've got $2.9 million to spend on somebody else. And Wilfredo Orozco is still around. Solid bat with a nice glove, some good personality traits. Says he's only looking for $2.2 million right now. But we'll check in on the other guys. I know Bonilla is going to be too much, but we might as well look. Yep, he's got an offer greater than our pool. Esparguera, the right-handed hitter, $2.8 million for the switch hitter. He's got that high power hitting profile with the concerns. I can't say contact is a real concern, but certainly the strikeouts are a concern that I tend to avoid. But I know Avery Sham is yelling at me right now to try to bring him on board. Santiago Renaga, he's got a bigger money offer out there. And the right fielder, Luis Aguilar, he's still looking for the $1.5 million that is supposedly his asking price. We've got, as I said, $2.9 million to spend. Avery Sham usually provides good advice, although he and I definitely have very different views on players. He's definitely more willing to, I believe, go with someone with contact and avoid strikeouts that I don't typically go with. But you certainly can't argue about the home run power in the eye with Mr. Esparguera. And I've already gone with a teenage pitcher, which is something that Avery very rarely ever wants me to do. I think we throw a $2.9 million offer route right now to Esparguera to potentially pair up with the big-time pitcher. It's every penny we've got left. If we don't get him signed, hopefully there's still an opportunity to maybe pivot to an Aguilar or an Orozco in the coming days. And Bonilla, Deshaun Seifu Light, has signed with Miami. See exactly what he went for. Not going to shock me if he got a full pill. Yeah, $5.7 million. So both Bonilla and Bacias ended up going for the full $5.7 million. I still think, although those guys are both really interesting, and I do need to throw Mr. Bonilla onto our prospects list as well. The fact that we could come out of this with a big-time pitching prospect and potentially a big-time everyday prospect is still very intriguing to me. Even though, to be perfectly honest, I have to admit that the two position players that I liked the best and that the worldwide scouting department liked the best were both Bonilla and Bacias. And I won't have either of them in my organization. But it's not inconceivable that I get the pitcher that both I and the worldwide scouting department like the best, along with one of the top 5 position player prospects in the pool when all was said and done. And if we're able to pull that off, I still think that's an interesting IAFA period. Still waiting to hear a little more from Espargera, besides the fact that he liked our deal for what it was. But there is a transaction that was made, although Mr. Ortega is still on the market. One of the other players that we had been talking about and tracking over time is now gone, and that's the outfielder Kimane Ibekwe. You may remember we almost signed him, or more accurately, almost traded for him before the trade deadline last year. Ibekwe has got going for him a pretty solid left-handed bat, pretty good durability. My big concern about him was his personality seems to be getting worse. And he did end up signing with the Rockies 4 years, $35 million total. So not bad numbers, but given that we've got good youth potentially in the outfield at this point, and we thought that Ibekwe's personality might be a little disruptive to our clubhouse. Certainly wouldn't have minded bringing him on board a month from now for a bargain contract, but I can't say I'm brokenhearted that the option's no longer there. And our buddy Vasco Espargera has signed for $2.9 million. So, again, not necessarily the batting profile I typically go for, but that being said, a competent corner outfielder who's a switch hitter, who has potentially world-class home run power to go with well above average gap power and an eye, could be a very interesting player for us down the line. Don't love that I don't have either Bacias or Bonilla in the organization, but coming out of this IAFA period with both Espargera in the organization is a big-time hitting prospect, and even more importantly than that, Clarindo Moreno, who I think could be an absolutely outstanding pitcher if he reaches his full potential, is still a pretty interesting class for me, and we made use of every bit of the $5.7 million that we had to spend this year, signing Moreno for $2.8 million and Espargera for $2.9 million. So when all was said and done, brought 2 youngsters that we really like into the organization. We'll certainly be tracking what Bacias and Bonilla do over the years, because those were by far the 2 most favored players from the worldwide scouting department. And as I said, they were my 2 favorite players as well. But I've got 2 guys in the system that I really like instead of 1. And we'll find out over the next 5, 10, 15 seasons whether or not I regret making that decision or not. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.